So, hello, Richard.
Hello, hi
Thank
Philip.
you that you took the opportunity to have an interview about body psychotherapy here
Okay,
in Prague.
okay,
I'm glad for that.
yeah,
I know you are a psychotherapist. You work as a psychotherapist
yeah,
in Germany and also in many different countries
yeah,
around the world, not only in Europe. You have several trainings in body psychotherapy,
yeah.
including bioenergetics, biosynthesis,
You mean myself? Yeah, I went through several trainings. Yeah, yeah,
PBSP, and so on.
yeah,
So it would be nice to talk about your view. What is actually biopsychotherapy for you?
yeah,
How
yeah,
do you see that?
yeah. Definitely, body psychotherapy is my, let's say, it's that type of work. I always, even if I made some exploration in other directions, I always came back to that, and I always came back with a new or a enriched view. So I came to the point, I mean, body psychotherapy is something what I'm doing since the mid of the 80s. In that time, it was more like working with the breathing in the psychotherapeutic process. And then later, I entered the bioenergetic training with Alexander Lowen, who is the founder of bioenergetic analysis. And then I went through that training and I learned, let's say, the hardcore body psychotherapy of its origin that was very much emotion oriented. It was in that time was a kind of a belief that so bigger the emotion which comes out, so better is securing effect, and the emotion in a bodily sense, like not just be sad and talk about being sad, but really giving the space for the client to cry and to feel that mourning or that really deep feeling. So it becomes a liberating force, the crying, and not only a bad place to be. Or then the bioenergetic in that time was a body psychotherapy approach, which was one of the main body psychotherapy approaches, which emphasized a lot on the expression of anger and hatred. And especially hatred is something what in classical psychotherapy, it's, I mean, you talk about it, you fantasize about it, you symbolize it, but the client, in a way, gets left alone in really experiencing it and learning to steer it in a way, and to find the center of it, where the center of a hatred is hurt, and the feeling of impotence and being left alone, and that feeling, so that create. And nowadays, in times we have right now, with terrorism and outbreaking wild hatred and everything, that has gets even a new meaning. I sometimes think on that, and I'm thankful that I have the experience of the bioenergetic of that time, where the dealing with anger and aggression maybe, and no, not maybe, definitely was in a way exaggerated, since it was a counter movement to the more psychoanalytical psychotherapy in that time, or comportamental, where these feelings had not really a space to be really there in its vitality. Yeah? Not only talk about hatred or about anger, but experience it in a possibility sphere, in a therapeutic protected space. So you can somehow learn that this is you too, and you don't have to put it back. So that is the origin body psychotherapy. And then in the 90s, more or less, body psychotherapy took different, since there were many schools, each school somehow had let's say, some emphasis on some aspect of what was needed to to serve all that aspects. So we had different schools, like in other psychotherapy directions also, often disputing each other, and like the old story, like we always have, yeah, many. But however, that's life. So, but there came other schools out of body psychotherapy, like the Boysen, Gerda Boysen approach, which emphasized very much on the so-called endodermic manifestation of the organism, which is the intestine. So people would say, what the intestine, my God, what intestine has to do with my depression? It has to do a lot with depression, and so on. And through all of that, body psychotherapy went through wild waters, mild waters. Some schools went a little bit an esoteric way, and so on and so on. And so we here in Prague, after we have done a couple of trainings here, and these are big trainings, 5 years. So, and when I say we, I'm talking about the trainer community we have and the community which offer here these trainings, which is you and Hansa and Misha and others. And so talking about the trainers, they all are very experienced in that. So they went through different waters, the wild waters, the soft waters. So I think we represent quite well the body psychotherapy, how it's today, since we come from a little bit different corners, but we have a lot in common. No? So let's say body psychotherapy since about 15 years is much more, it's not so much anymore emotion-oriented. It is giving place for emotion, that's still the same, but we don't see that the therapy is just putting out emotion. Therapy is working out the conflict, working out the, if I call it information, the imprint, the internalized relationships, which my past, in the sense, my past is not what running me, but is my conclusions, which I drew out of my past, which are running me in the here and now. And that you can work best. It's one, so sometimes I get asked, what's better in body psychotherapy than in common psychotherapy, or why work with the body or so. Yeah.
What are the advantages to work with the body in psychotherapy? What do you think about it?
I have a little bit difficult with saying work with the body, because it sounds like, I think we work with the whole person. And that is naturally the body in it. And I mean, every psychotherapist will say that I work with the whole person. But maybe in classical psychotherapy, now also depending very much which one you're talking about. If you talk about psychoanalysis, then you have to distinguish between the different styles of psychoanalysis again. I know psychoanalysis, we pay a lot of attention to the body. And in origin, psychoanalysis was a highly bodily approach. If you take Freud from his origin, even the term libido and terms they are used in psychoanalysis, they are very bodily oriented. And our theory we have in body psychotherapy is more drawn toward psychoanalysis. We are coming and from bonding theories. That's where we come from. But we enrich it with the literally not, let's say, dealing with the body messages, dealing with posture, dealing with the self-regulation, which is always a kind of a physical self-regulation, or let's say, you have anger or whatever, and you have to swallow it down for whatever reasons you already said. Swallow it down. So keep it down there, and it's important to be able to swallow down anger, or to let's say postpone. It's not about feeling anger and then you have to get angry. That's an animal who does that. A human can postpone things. You learn that, but many people don't postpone it forever. And then it's not making good. It raises the cortisol level in the blood. It decreases the functionality of your immune system, and all kinds of things are happening on a endocrinological and a level of neurotransmitters, which in your body are not really. Let's put it that way. If I put it in a kind of a image language, I would say that there's no flow, and the flow, you are not in flow with yourself. And the term to be in flow with yourself nowadays is even accepted in psychotherapy. Since a couple of years, they start to accept that as a literal term. And I think that flow already is bodily. Flow, is liquid, is flow. And in body psychotherapy, it's very much about getting in the flow. Flow is breathing. If I say something and I feel connected to what I'm saying, it has a natural power in that, a natural authenticity, and it's comfortable. If I'm not connected with my speech, with my breathing, if I'm kind of stop myself all the time, then I'm kind of have to substitute that with more mental activity. So it's a way of coming actually down, body psychotherapy, and helping the people to, if I say to live in their body, it's actually not, you cannot say because they live in their body anyway, but they don't feel that they live in their body. And to feel it, that I'm in my body, for example, when I'm angry, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, when I'm, it's different than just knowing it. It's like, it's a way of, that word presence, which is often used for that, to being present in that. And presence is partially cognitive, and a big part is sensation. And sensation, which is the pre-form of emotion, has to do with identity. And we know from brain research, from Damasio, for example, that there is a felt sense of self, which is a body feeling, which is constant in the background. And we know that depressive people, for example, people with depression or with anxiety attacks, if you ask them where they are, a depressed feels like condensed together. Anxiety attacks, they feel like they're up there. If you give a person with anxiety attack just instruction, if you have a good relationship to the person, that's required as a therapist, then you say, exhale. Just to exhale, the excitement level, the arousal level immediately levels down. And the amygdala, which is running the show in such a moment, in that moment, and everybody knows that if the amygdala, which means the fear in the brain, the fear area, if that runs the show, you cannot listen anymore. But you're responsive to bodily things. Yeah, so that makes it for itself negligible for dealing, for example, with any disturbance which needs to regulate down the system, and in a way not to relax but to discharge it in a good way, and to develop skills in there. So in body psychotherapy, people, besides going through therapeutic process of re-experiencing, they always find it gets more real because they are more incorporated literally in their body, and then they stand up and they feel like, well, I'm here with all of that what is in me. And that's an important experience. Okay.
So when I hear it, I think there are quite clear several, let's say, advantages of body psychotherapy, as you said. And I'm thinking about the issue of psychosomatics. There is literally in the name connection of psyche and soma, like the body. And nowadays there are different approaches to work with psychosomatic problems. How do you see the role of body psychotherapy in this area?
In Germany, we have a lot of psychosomatic clinics, and it's a big thing in Germany, the psychosomatic clinics, and you find all kinds. You find those who are more comportamental-oriented, comportamental therapy, others more psychoanalytical, and so on. And there are an increasing number of clinics which work with body psychotherapy, because they're starting to check or they're starting to notice that in psychosomatic medicine is a very interesting and rich, let's say, area, discipline actually, but what's missing is method. I mean, the methods come, I think, more from the area of behavioral therapy, but these are interesting methods, and the body psychotherapy methods in itself, which help to own the stuff which is in you in a way that it doesn't create disturbance of behavior, is increasing. This approach is increasingly successful in psychosomatic hospitals, clinics, or treatment. I have a lot of psychosomatic clients, and I cannot find anything more interesting up to now. Maybe I still find something else, but I'm very satisfied with working in a body psychotherapy way with them. The people get better. I have good experiences with them, and the people, because in psychosomatic medicine, often they go into relaxation techniques. Body psychotherapy would not say, if somebody is tense, you have to relax. No, if you are tense, you have to sense the tension first, and what the tension does in you, and the tension is an action which is stopped. Yeah. So continue the action. Express it, bring it in expression. So I make fists when I do say that, for example. So I had anger in my mind. So if I have an anger and somebody tells me relax, I don't know, that I think is a repetition probably of what I experienced when I was a child or something like that. But when I'm angry, then maybe anger is a vitality or is something important I have to say and to express. So how I can bring that out, except just talking about it, and just being with it and talking coming out of the feeling, not splitting it, anger and then talking about it. No, talking about it and anger and a frame which is safe, so I can experience and come out with that messages which are in me. That kind of faded parts of myself can come in and get a reality dimension, a felt reality. And then I can be with that, and then the other can see me, we go in an interaction together. And or I come out with the anger and you make whoop, for example. And then I feel, oh, I have an affect. So in the moment of that, in my anger comes a pleasure. So there's no anger anymore, there's pleasure because I arrived in you. Yeah. So if you just talk about it, that experience is, we can also talk about it and have very good results with that, but it's not the same. It's not lived in that way. So it has a quality, body psychotherapy, of making it real. And we do this and we have instruments, like we call that making an experiment. So we have a conversation. Let's say you would be therapist, would ask me, and I would say such and such. Oh, I'm very da da da, and I'm very let's say I feel depressed, and my wife is terrible, and whatever I would say, and then we could go on just talking about that, and I would define. You would find out more what it is about in me, and then in body psychotherapy we would say, well, Richard, what's about we do an experiment? And the experiment would be maybe feeling a little bit that anger now, and what I can do with that anger. You give me a stick and there's a pillow. It's a classical, I think everybody, even from the people who listen now to tape here, will know that, and then you hit and you feel that in your body, for example. And then suddenly I feel that there is how much energy is invested in there. And suddenly I can feel what's behind the anger. And suddenly I feel kind of a sadness for not being heard, or for that. And that I don't have to analyze, I experience it. And then you, as a therapist, you name it, and you say, yeah, it sounds like you have not been very misunderstood, and you somehow retreated in a place of hatred. Could that be? And then I was, yeah. And I say, yes, because not I understand it, you tell me, because I just experienced it. And that's a difference. Okay? So, for example, I'll give you an example. Yeah? And then we have in psychotherapy further developments, in body psychotherapy, working with the eyes, to defocus when people are too overfocused, compulsive disorders, fear, attacks, trauma. For trauma, it's very good because trauma is, like, in a way, you are overwhelmed, so you have no shores anymore for your experience. So it's about shoring your experience. What's the best shore you have is your body, feeling you in that, going into that experience. In bioenergetic, we call it grounding. Yeah. So all of that is a, let's say, it's not a question whether I work with the body or not, or the mind. It's about connecting the mind work with the body work. Yeah. And that's often misunderstood. Yeah. And so, yeah.
About the, let's say, some specific areas for body psychotherapy, as you said, the trauma work.
For example?
I have now in my mind what is the role of the touch in body psychotherapy. Because when I imagine some colleagues from other areas of psychotherapy, they might think about touching, and they might think about transference and danger of touching and so on. What can you say about touching in body psychotherapy?
Okay. First of all, I think that people you just mentioned are correct. And I agree that this cannot be overseen. Just the conclusion they draw and the conclusion I draw is different. Because I think touch can be a very good vehicle in psychotherapy. But, and there the colleagues are right, you have to keep in mind that I have always to ask my question, when I touch, what's the meaning? What do I transport with that in that specific moment, with that specific person, in our specific momentum of therapy? Every touch has a meaning. But every no touch has also a meaning. Everything has a meaning. So, for example, when I have especially individual therapy clients, and when I'm in individual therapy, I don't touch so much, and I'm a body psychotherapist, so I don't touch much. If I touch, I'm very careful with touching a woman. If I'm individual therapy, I have a natural, I don't know, I don't think it can become easily complicated unless you have a very clear and maybe a long-term therapeutic relationship with that client, where actually I take my feeling as a measure. I feel immediately, I'm not that toucher, a person like I touch just all the time. I touch selectively, and it depends what the reason for the touch. So we have certain, let's say, methods, techniques in body psychotherapy, like working with the head, which comes from craniosacral therapy, which is not a body psychotherapy, but it's a body therapy. comes actually from osteopathy from that direction. And we can make a good use for body psychotherapy for that, in our style of body psychotherapy. And there, of course, you have to touch. But then I'd say to the client, for example, if that's applied, people who are very much somehow caught in their head and cannot come down in the breathing, then I would suggest that. And so I'm very aware what I'm doing. I'm not just touching like this. I'm very specifically touching. I don't do a touch which creates in itself excitement or I'm aware about errors in the relationship. I don't try to be not erotic, and I don't try to be erotic. I'm just me in the way I am there, and hold the head and maybe work with the neck, and then I'm checking back. How is it for you? Then I go back, sit again, and how was the experience? Breathe down, so looking at the issue the person brought in, and so on. That's how a touch can look like. For example, some colleagues touch much more. You talking to one type of body psychotherapist who is more careful with touch, and some other people are less. Sometimes I have a question there, and I'm not so sure if everybody reflects it in the way. And I think that it is definitely a critical question, but it shouldn't lead to the point that you don't touch. It leads to the point that you learn to deal with that, and not just don't touch. Why don't touch? We are physical beings. We touch also when we say hello. It's socially regulated, and in body psychotherapy groups, it's different, because there people touch each other. We do exercises. We do experiments. And there also I touch then, because there's a presence of all the people. We don't have an intimate situation, we have a group situation. In a group situation, I think body psychotherapy works perfectly. There's a further development of body psychotherapy. It's not body psychotherapy, it's a body-oriented psychotherapy, which is different, which is the pathotherapy, where I'm also trained and I'm a supervisor in that. But my main thing is body psychotherapy, and the patho work I think is a wonderful extension. If you want to work really the information, but the relationship issue of this inner system, they are very precise, for example. And there they create almost like in constellation work a little bit, but it's not constellation work. They create scenes of ideal parenting, reparenting of ideal parents with role players, and there happens touch and everything within an experiment. And it's interesting, if you call it experiment, it's like you enter a stage, there you do that experience happens, and you go out of the stage, and then you look at it. And that works, and I never seen a problem with touching there. For contrary, I've seen more problem with not touching in certain moments. So I think but it has to be a focus of awareness. They're very important, not just touching like that you should be aware who you are for the client. But that doesn't mean I cannot touch. Why? That I find actually also strange. This kind of, it's for me not a solution. What I can tell you about maybe what I could add is, for what I think is body psychotherapy especially useful. Yeah. And nowadays the magazines, newspapers are full of one theme: burnout syndrome. Body psychotherapy has, that comes more from the bioenergetic approach, I have the book in Czech, but the exercises are excellent exercises for stress regulation. And stress regulation doesn't mean relaxing. It means, that's what you said before, let the curve of the tension increase even. until it comes a natural release and you come down instead of doing an effort to relax. So it's a kind of, and that exercises are very useful, and you can use for also in coaching and in such areas just for, let's say, prevention. And dealing with it's a way of, it's like just like you do yoga for working your, extending your body and your space. It's body psychotherapy helps to come down to yourself and you feel more here. And the best what can happen to you or to me is that we are really here. So that is very good. So it's good for enriching your life in a way. You can use the exercise. You don't need to do psychotherapy for that. You can do just the exercise. Then the psychotherapy, psychosomatic, as you already mentioned, anxiety disorders, neurotic disorders, compulsion. It's useful, but I wouldn't say it's the method for that. Compulsion is anyway in psychotherapy a very critical area. And psychiatric disorders, so-called, depends what it is. Of course, I would not work with a psychiatric client who has a problem with boundaries. I wouldn't work with expanding the boundaries. I would work with feeling the boundaries. So with some people you work on expansions, and some people you work on diminishing, on reducing to a healthy size, and feel that on your skin, in your body, in your posture, and so on. No? Yeah. So depression, very good. Yeah. Especially in depression, the working with anger is very important. And it has a direct effect on the, if you do anger work, has a strong effect on the neurotransmitters right away. There has been research done about, for example, PBSP pessotherapy has been research done with traumatic people. Was very useful, showed very good results with traumatized people. So with trauma you can work very well with body psychotherapy if you do it appropriate. It's always if you do it appropriate. If somebody who has not much experience, and you have to watch out. You have to know what you do. You know?
So
yeah.
Let's talk about another issue. I'd like to mention here that we have the training in integrative body psychotherapy.
Yeah.
It's not very usual. Nowadays the tendency to integrate in psychotherapy is quite more strong than sometime in the past. And you are the lecturer in the training. And I'd like to talk about the integration in this body psychotherapeutic training. What do you find good about the integration, and maybe also what is integrated there, if we could talk about
that? Now, that integrative approach we're having comes simply through, we are 3 trainers. Like I said, one time I said in a group, and there are 100 years of experience. That means each of us has about 35 years of experience in body psychotherapy. We are all 3 old foxes of that field. We have seen many waters passing by, and each of us has done several trainings and we had long years of digesting the trainings and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so each of us has a kind of specialities in some direction. I'm going more in the, for me, it's the neurobiological aspects are very highly interesting and important that we confront ourselves in what we are doing with really that what in research is coming out, and we differentiate our method accordingly. The other thing from my side is integrative, is we working with mindfulness and awareness. Each psychotherapy, body psychotherapy, is always also a training of awareness for the client, and it's necessary, otherwise you cannot go forward. And so for that, I bring in, for example, also meditation in a very, but it's a body-oriented meditation. So that's, for example, me, and now from the other trainer we have Marianne Ingenhus. Is one of the first in the field in Europe. She's a long time. She's very experienced. She's a really explorer of the little bodily reactions which accompany conflict and solution, and how you can use this. She's very precise. I appreciate her a lot. And Liane Sink from Brazil, she is by the way, like Marianne Ingenhus is an international trainer for bioenergetic analysis also, and Liane Sink is international trainer for bioenergetic analysis, plus international trainer for biosynthesis, and she is very experienced, long time. She is in Sao Paulo, where she's from. She is very sophisticated and recognized, highly recognized teacher of body psychotherapy and therapist. So I'm very happy to have that. They were very different, the three of us, and our approach, which tries to get the best out of that what we know in our long time of experience, to bring that together, so the people, so you don't need to go through a certain school, because a certain school has, every school is a little bit narcissistic in itself. That you have to serve the school, and we want to serve the people, to serve the clients, and we thanks to the school experiences we're having, we are trying to go forward with that, or how we can bring that together, the bioenergetic wisdom, even from scenic psychotherapy, like PBSP, for example, aspects which help to become even more efficient in the work, and or from Gerda Boysen approach to bring elements in, and so on. So we always try to get that let's put it that way. After having experienced all kinds of things, we know what works and what doesn't, and so we try to get that distillated knowledge to bring that into the teaching, so the people don't have to that's why you must not wait so long until you can make the next questions which go further. Instead of all the time, is that therapy better, body psychotherapy, is that better? We make a kind of a distillate, and then we face what else is out there. It's a kind of I would call it it's an integrative approach. Yeah.
You mentioned all three of you trainers in the training, and what do you think? What do you bring to the training the most? What is actually your, let's say, your specialty or something like this? What you want to bring and you bring to the training? Because as you mentioned, you are all three quite different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's what I actually said before. That was, I would say, now in the first place I would call it the connection of experience, of information, and of body process. That is, and that kind of that interface, that where to weave it in, to really have it mental and bodily, mental and bodily, to go in this, to instead of mental bodily, actually mental bodily. So it's a kind of a, so that's my, it's one of my, where I feel most interested also in, yeah. Then it has a lot to do with presence, and maybe I say that here, you can say that here, yes, I can say that here. I'm, like, for my background, I'm also have a big background of 20 years of learning with the Ritwan school, Almas. That's a kind of spiritual approach, which is very down to earth, which pays a lot to attention to authenticity and to be centered. And it's a very nice approach. That was very helpful for me, and that somehow contaminated, in a positive sense, or enriched my body psychotherapy skills. I think that's very interweaved in my case, and so I appreciate the process of meditation, free from religion, just as a optimizing skill for my experience, you know? And to make sure that the old things from the old school get their place, that we don't forget that, that for the classical, that sometimes we look back and say, wait a moment, what else we have in the basket? And then maybe from time to time to check that, how that can be now again reintegrated, it's always things we somehow leave behind. And sometimes it's good to look back and say, hey, wait a moment, there was something that worked well. I actually don't do that anymore. Let's have a look on that. How maybe that somehow here now, maybe we can use that. Yeah.
Another question what is coming to my mind is when you see the trainees, the people, let's say students in the training, going through the process of learning this integrative approach, how do you see the way they assimilate the integration coming from you, trainers? What are maybe some challenges for them? How they deal with the integration?
There is a correlation to the willingness to work out your own stuff. Psychotherapy, body psychotherapy in special, you have to work on your body, your own body. Work means wake it up, being more connected to it, and if trainees in the training, let's say in third year, fourth year, you see exactly when I see them working how much they are in their own process. So in our training, self-experience, my own therapy, my own process is, let's put that way, I wanted to say it's 70%, but something resists in me to say that. And I would say it's 100%. And the other thing is also 100%. So as a total, we have 200%. I wouldn't say 50-50. Yeah, it's both extremely important, and the one doesn't go without the other. So we emphasize a lot that the trainees in our training, they have to go through individual therapy. In the trainings itself, we do a lot of experiments and working with each other. They get very early, they start already to work with each other. So they will get trust slowly in the process. And the trust is correlating to what you worked in yourself. And but that's not, maybe that sounds like, oh, that's a lot of work, but no, it makes the music. That is what makes, it's actually, and people who do this, they are inspired. So we are working, you do your own therapy, is inspiration. It's the inspirational part. That the other part, which is the method, techniques, and so on, and the way how you are with the person, your posture. That's very important. Posture is body, by the way. That this somehow interplays. Yeah. So this has to come together, and that's a focus. That's very important. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Richard, I also think about the question in what relationship is between body psychotherapies and the mainstream psychotherapy. How do you see that?
You mean in Germany or?
Well, actually, that's a good question.
For example, Germany.
You might take Germany as your homeland.
Depends on the country. Yeah, it's different.
Let's take Germany.
But okay, in Germany. Well, body psychotherapy is still struggling in Germany for its official recognition from the Council of State Council, where they decide whether it is a method eligible for health insurance payment. And there is still on the way, still struggling, still has a hard time with that, but it's on the way. And generally, they opened up a little bit. For example, systemic therapy got now accepted, and it might be that we get in. But basically, let me give a total different example. Go to politics. Germany, as you know, probably we have a very strong ecological movement with the Green Party in Germany, which is even governing some states, and so one state, Baden-Württemberg. So, okay. So we had the Green Party. That was a big shocker on beginning, many years, 30 years ago, was a big shocker. And in the meantime, they are in parliament, and they are in governments and everything. They got ministers and everything. And in the meantime, they became mainstream themselves. And now what happened, that's interesting. Besides that they are mainstream, the ecology policies, watching the environment, is in the program of almost every political party in Germany as a natural ingredient. So what one effect the Green Party worked, even if they would disappear, they made them brought their themes into the mainstream, and except the right wing, which is the AfD and the Nazi direction parties, which unfortunately are boiling in Germany as well. But except those, but in the mainstream big parties, the ecology is a normal ingredient now. So, coming to psychotherapy, I observe a similar tendency. I observe that suddenly psychoanalysts call me, behavioral therapists and so on, show up in workshops, and they want to learn about body psychotherapy. They don't want to become a body psychotherapist necessarily, but they want to integrate the body. Usually they come, what they say is, well, brain research brain research is basically completely confirming what we are, let's say in a phenomenological way, are experiencing. And now we suddenly get confirmations from highly scientific researchers, and this in the clinical psychotherapy in Germany has a percussion. So there come more and more people who are getting curious. Wow, how you do this? How working with the body? I'm interested. And my experience generally is, if somebody like that comes to a workshop, participates, involves himself in it, experientially, I'm saying, that person goes out and says yes to it. That's my experience. I've actually, or maybe the no-sayer don't say it and I don't know it. But I must say that generally people are, whoa, wow, that works. That type of, yeah. And I tell you something, if I would find out that it doesn't work, that all is a fake, I wouldn't have any moment a problem. It's not my party body psychotherapy, so I do it because I see it works. If I would see something else would work better, I would go there. I wouldn't have. I don't feel attached in that way. I would say then, body psychotherapy brought me to that, and then I definitely would do that. I wouldn't have. I'm not married to that, no, but I'm there because I see it works, and it has a good it gives a lot of benefits. And another thing, when sometimes in my practice sometimes I have eight clients, and that's a lot. Sometimes I have 9 a day. It's a lot. And sometimes, when let's say it happens that in the 7th or the 8th, I do a more body intervention, for example, I'm immediately refreshed. It's amazing. It's sometimes also, I'm not working all the time with the body. I'm often only speech. Also, I'm not all the time body psychotherapy, but I have it in my background all the time, and I know when to do it. And when I do it, I must again and again, I actually should know that already, but it's like I would not know it. Again and again when I do it, it's amazing how it makes me more awake, and it's like takes the stress of the whole day work, not stress, but the kind of, you're tired, and it refreshes me working with people, and people go out refreshed, I am there refreshed. And that's nice about body psychotherapy, because it does good for the therapist. Yeah. And that is something we never talk about, but it's more, you are more fresher, you're more there, it's interesting. Yeah, so that's why I do it. And if I find something else, it's more interesting, I say, thank you, body psychotherapy, and I would say, I'm curious about you. Yeah.
That brings me to the, let's say, last question, which is more visionary. Well, how do you see the future of body psychotherapy? Do you have some visions about it?
Yeah, I have. I think on the long term, body psychotherapy, or my wish would be that we don't have to need anymore to call it body psychotherapy, that you just call it psychotherapy. And it's a natural ingredient of psychotherapy, because psyche in body, it's absurd to even name it different. It's one thing like you have in traditional old medicine systems like Chinese medicine and so on, or in Ayurveda and Ayurvedic medicine, you have that integrated anyway. In Ayurvedic medicine, the intestine is the root of the soul. And we know that the brain from the enteric nervous system, so-called, which is what's called the belly brain, where 80% of the serotonin is being produced, which relates to how I feel, how my mood is. So I think body psychotherapy is a transitional term. And someday I think we do just psychotherapy. And it's not anymore a question that I say to you, what happens as you breathe down in your body when you tell me how difficult that was with your girlfriend or whatever. That a link, so that's just a normal thing. And that's my vision. And there I'm carefully optimistic. Not that everybody will do that, but more and more will be done that way. And that will spread because it has a good effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. This vision thing from the let's let's say, non-mainstream psychotherapy, like body psychotherapy, becomes something what is just incorporated in psychotherapy itself, naturally.
we are the partisans, we are the guerrilla tactic, but in a way because we are part of it anyway. It's body.
Okay, so I hope this vision or some sister of this vision will come true. Hopefully,
Let's
I will see it.
Yeah. Hopefully, I will see it.
So, I thank you very much, Richard, for the interview.
Yeah. Thank you for the interesting questions.
It's good. I really enjoyed